All right. So you ready for me to spitfire some questions at you?
Yes.
All right. There's a couple of them right off the bat that are all similar. So I'm going to ask them to you, and you tell me if they're the same question or if I should ask them separately. First one is, hi, why can't we use an Andis tool for show grooming? Another one is, why is raking not suitable for show grooming? And just to clarify, can the Andis rake be used in place of a stone? So those are all kind of related questions.
Okay. They're all different questions, but they are related. And Andy, when I get to the end of my answer, if I've left something out, please re-presence part of the question. But the main reason that we don't use the Andis or a Mars Coat King or any kind of rake for show grooming is because it will tend to cut the coat a little bit every time you use it. Now, once you've gotten to a show coat, especially if you're going to show over a period of time, either you're campaigning a special or it's your first show dog, so it may take you a while to get your first point, to get your championship. Just as a note, when I first started, I showed for a year before I got my first point on my first Schnauzer. So that was a fair amount of time of being out there. And even though it's only a little bit at a time, maybe incrementally, that you might be cutting the coat, you'll start to see changes over time that reflect that. And the more you get into that, the harder and harder it is to repair it. The other thing is that when you have a show coat and you're trying to keep it tuned up for an extended period of time, you're typically going to be targeting certain areas more than others. And it's just much more effective to do that by finger plucking or using one of the stripping, either a textured tool like the stone or the groomer DK tools, or using a knife. Now, it's pretty much the rake and a stone, or a rake and the finger plucking, are opposite ends of the spectrum of the work we're doing. When I use a stone, or I use my fingers, or I use a knife, I'm pulling specific individual clumps of hair. When I'm raking, I'm not picking specific areas. I'm not picking specific hair. I'm just raking through either all over, like I said, for socialization, or to maybe build a layer in if I'm want to transition into a rolled coat or a rotated coat down the road, then maybe I want to build in a layer. And there is a process for that. In fact, the recipe talks about raking, and that's part of why the timing in the recipe is what it is, because it allows for a specific stage for you to strip off every bit of fuzzies or any bit of broken coat that might have come as a result of using the rake. But in terms of show management, generally what we're doing, especially if you're a novice, and if you're following the recipe, you are timing for a specific window that you're going to be showing in when your coat is in good condition. And as an aside, so much easier, so much better return on investment of your time and your effort to try to maximize multiple show weekends at your goal time period, rather than a lot of people in the beginning think, oh, I'll plan to show once a month. Once a month is probably the hardest schedule to maintain a nice hard coat, because it grows so much in that period of time. So I really recommend, if you're thinking once a month, if you could change that to 2 weekends over 6 weeks, or 2 weekends a month, or 3 weekends over 7 or 8 weeks, you're going to have a better result than you are if you try to do it once a month. Did I leave any question unanswered there, Andy, about the rake?
I don't think so. Why can't we use the Andis tool for show grooming? I think you covered that. Why is raking not suitable for show grooming? I think you covered that. Just to clarify, can the Andis rake be used in place of the stone? And I think you covered that.
Great.
Okay. So the next question, when you say section stripping, do you mean stripping right down to the skin in each section?
So generally speaking, yes. If you follow the recipe that I posted earlier, there is part of that that is meant to put a layer in ahead of when you section strip so that there will be some coat growing in when you pull it down. But to do the traditional section stripping, which will put your dog in a good show coat for 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how fast your individual dog's coat grows and blows, then that's, I'm going to put this in the blooper reel because that just totally went out of my head. I just totally lost my train of thought. Help me out, Andy.
When you say section stripping,
Oh,
do you
right.
mean
Stripping it
stripping
down
down
to
to
the
the
skin or
skin?
not? Okay, thank you. But yeah, if we're just doing the section stripping, no bells and whistles to extend the coat or anything like that. Yes, you're going to strip down as all the way down to the skin in those sections. Now, I'm also going to say that if you agonize too much over getting every tiny little bit, that's going to make things harder for you. So that's why in the recipe, there is a section after you've done the center section and 2 or 3 weeks later, you've done the neck, shoulders, and the rear. Then 3 weeks or so after that, before the coats had a chance to grow back in everywhere, then you do a pass where you just pull everything that remains that's long enough to pull. And then you're definitely going to be taking it down to the undercoat at that stage. So to have your best results, you want to pull as much as you can reasonably in the section, but do know that there is in the recipe a place 6 or so weeks down the road after that first section where you're going to strip off anything that wasn't quite long enough to strip your first go round or that has been broken and it's a little bit longer.
Great question. Great answer. I love that. Next question. Can you talk about how to start and maintain a rolling coat for a non-show dogs?
Sure. That is in some ways the easiest to do, and in some ways it's the hardest to do. And the reason it's the hardest is because every dog is a little differently. Their coat rolls a little different. And so whatever I say might not be one size fits all here. But especially starting with a puppy, if you start with regular raking to get some hair coming in, and you keep up that process until you start to see a layer coming in underneath, then you strip what's long, and you try to maintain about a once a month grooming schedule, you will come into a point where you can just work the coat, whatever's long enough to pull every 3 or 4 weeks and get into layers. And basically that's what rolling the coat is. The easiest way to look at rolling the coat is that whatever your interval is, say 3 or 4 weeks, you pull off the longest layer and you leave the shorter layers underneath. Now, some people like to pick at that coat every week to keep it consistent, and that's fine. I find for novices, that's actually harder to see the results that you're getting than if you only work it about once a month. Because if you're if every 4 weeks you pull some hair off, then you get some good distance, some good length between your shortest layer, your middle layer, and maybe the layer that's ready to pull. And that's going to make your rolling process simpler. It's a bigger conversation than I can give in a one-size-fits-all answer. But rolling a coat can take 3, 4, 5 months to get started. I have one dog that I worked with who she had a pretty soft coat when she was born and starting to get some texture to it. Some of you know Rosie. She had a lot of sensitivity to skin stimulation. So it's literally taken me 2 years to get her into a rotating coat, but now I finally have, between mostly raking and some finger plucking. So if you have some specific questions about getting your dog into a rolling coat, probably I'm going to say, let's get on a consultation call. So send me an email at StrawHatStandards@gmail.com. And we can talk about your specific dog, your specific goals, and how do we get you there. There is a process using the recipe. I even use section stripping as one of the modalities that helps me get to rolling the coat. Once you're in a rolling coat, it's pretty easy to maintain it. The challenge is getting from a long blown coat like Karma's to a rolling coat, because there's just several moving parts about that, and that's just going to take time, and you're not going to see immediate results to it. So I think that's my answer about that.
Great. Next question. Do all dogs' coats grow slower in the middle section? Would the planner work for other breeds?
Yeah, I expect so. And I do know with a number of the terriers that I've stripped that it seems to be the same. The timing may be different, and that's the other reason that the planner's perfect, because just like there's some variation in the speed that a Schnauzer's coat grows, there's variation in other breeds too. So if you're documenting when you're pulling a layer down, and you document that on your planner, and then you just watch for when the hair sprouts, then you're going to have and you document that, then you'll know for whatever breed you're working with what your timetable tends to be for that breed or for that dog. So you can use the planner for sure with other breeds just as much as you can with the Schnauzer.
Wonderful. Thank you. How about on a grooming salon? When a client requests their Schnauzer to be hand stripped, do I always follow the recipe?
This is a great question. And I could do an entire webinar. In fact, I probably will do an entire webinar coming up for professionals who are offering hand stripping. It took me a long time of doing hand stripping in the salon to find paradigms that work for the majority of clients, how to explain to clients what's done, and that the results are not always the same from one session to another. And as a professional, it's really important that you know where your level of mastery is, because there's often probably the number one way that I get clients with broken coats that need to be repaired in Schnauzers and in other breeds is because the person took the dog to somebody professionally who maybe overestimated their proficiency with the technique and broke the coat, or just got the timing really off, or just didn't know how to communicate well with the client about especially with a pet strip, maybe they don't strip the head. Maybe they clippered the head because the head may take just as long to do as the rest of the body. And because it's time consuming, then it can be an expensive offering as a professional. So you really need to know what your limits are. You really need to know what your experience level is. And if you'd like to have a conversation about what that might look like for you as a professional, please send me an email. Let's get on a call so I can find out what your needs are and just even give you some guidance to get started. It's an important conversation. I really, one of my goals is to help more people learn how to do this dyeing art. There is a market in having this skill and being able to offer it professionally, but there are some ways I've learned over time that make it easier or much harder to do. So I'm happy to have the conversation about adding this to your professional grooming practice if you're a professional groomer.
Wonderful. I like that answer. I love that answer. Do you hand strip black Schnauzer the same as a salt and pepper? Have you noticed a difference? My black is so much hair compared to the salt and pepper.
Well, in principle, it's the same process. I do find, now the part about there being so much hair on a black versus a salt and pepper, that's probably more to do with the individual dogs, because there are some salt and peppers that just have a tremendous amount of coat and some blacks that grow it pretty slowly. So that's going to be an individual question, probably more. But one of the things, the black coat's a little more forgiving if you're a beginner. The salt and pepper, because of the banding, if you break the coat, not only do you get texture changes, but you get color changes that can look a little odd, that can have the coat growing in kind of patchy, or especially if you're not symmetrical with the parts you're working on. You know, sometimes as a beginner, I would underestimate how long something would take me to do, and I would do all of one side and then be exhausted, and then I still had the other side to do. And if I waited too long to do the other side, well, they're not going to be the same length when they grow in, and they're going to look a little funny from one side to the other. So the black coat's forgiving in that regard, but over time, the black coat, if it gets broken, will get softer and softer. And in many cases, that black coat will also fade or turn gray or a little silvery. So that can be a sign to you that, oh, I thought I was stripping this coat properly, but if your black hand stripped Schnauzer is starting to come in gray or faded, not that nice hard black color, then that's probably a tip off that you getting some broken coat there too.
Great. I love it. A few more. My PS Giant Schnauzer has soft hair on the breast and legs, and those are difficult, even impossible, to hand strip. How can I improve those parts to get better hair?
Great question. And that question is potentially regionally more important than others. For example, in Europe, they show the dogs with much more texture in the legs. In the US, we're all about the chalk and the furnishings and the big legs, and that's a different issue. So not knowing which area you're from, that's why I'm prefacing it that way, because I don't want to give you advice in the one place that would hinder your hinder your results in the other place. What
She
now?
just messaged she's from Europe.
Okay, that helps. Now, I will say that when I'm not maintaining my dogs for show, I maintain them to have a harder coat on the legs because it's easier to take care of. My retired dogs, even if I keep them in a stripped coat, I do work the legs. And what I do for that, and Other people, I'm sure, have other methods that work and may not agree with me. But what I do is I use the rake, the Andis tool or the Coat King, and I lightly rake through the legs after I've brushed. And then that uniformly will pull some of that harder coat out. And then that will have new coat growing in under it. So if you do that, say, every 2 to 4 weeks, month over month over month, you will find that you will get shorter and shorter legs with denser and denser coat. It'll never be as dense and hard probably as on the body. That depends on your genetics a little bit also, because there's a different gene profile for lots of furnishings versus not as many furnishings. So there's that. But between raking regularly to get it started and then finger plucking, just like you do on the other parts of the coat, especially areas like the elbow that we usually keep tighter, the front of the legs, we usually keep that a little tighter. So a combination of raking and some finger plucking and time is how you're going to keep harder hair coming in on the legs.
Great. Yeah, it's difficult is what she mentioned. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
If you have a small area of broken hair, how can you fix it quickly?
Well, kind of depends on what your circumstances are, but there really is no quickly, because the only way to fix it is to pull the broken coat out, and then it's going to take 6 weeks to sprout. And then it's going to take some number of weeks longer than that to get any length on it. So without knowing more details around the specific situation, the specific circumstances, that's about all the information that I could give. Now, if it's a show coat, for example, and you look and you realize that you've broken part of it, then when you're addressing the rest of the coat in around that same area and you're pulling it, then you're going to want to make sure you get into that hole of broken coat to pull the broken part as well, so that that hair starts to come back in at the same time, so you don't end up with a patch that's a different length than everything around it, because that's additionally a challenge to deal with. So without being able to more clearly visualize the situation, that's what I can tell you there. There's not really a quick fix. There's 6 weeks after you pluck it is when it sprouts, and a few weeks after that is when it's a useful length. And depending on where the coat's broken, you may have to grow it out a little bit for it to get long enough for you to be able to grip it with your fingers to pull it. I will say that generally speaking, the best way to fix broken coat is finger plucking. Once you have, once it's been cut and it's finer and it's more delicate, you're more likely to recut it or re-break it using a knife. You're the most likely with a knife. You're a little less likely, but still there's a probability of doing that if you're using a stone or some other textured tool. But if you're finger plucking, you pretty much will not break the hair. Then it's a matter of, is it long enough and can you make it grippy enough, maybe with ear powder, to be able to pull it, and just pull a little bit at a time, and it's going to pull easier.
Great. Sorry, I was just in the middle of captioning another question here. Just a second.
No problem.
My giant's head is difficult to hand strip. The coat is so soft and the head is sensitive. She hates it. Would a tool help? I've even used some thinning scissors to get her to look better.
So what I would probably do in that case is a little bit of remedial work, because part of the issue is now the dog hates it. So that probably means that it's either been done a little too fast, or a little too much hair pulled at a time, or something over time that the dog just doesn't like the experience. If the dog has a kind of a softer coat in general, then that's going to be the worst on the head. The head is always, even on Karma, where the white bands of her coat were like this long, on the head, the white bands are much shorter. So you get into soft coat a lot faster, and you're more likely to break and then continue to break. So what I would say is probably put a little ear powder in the head weekly and rake it at first, so that process, while it will cut some of the coat, will also pull some of the coat. So you will have some harder coat starting to come in. And especially if it's all one length right now, either because of being thinnered or because it got broken when it was pulled, it's the hardest to finger pluck when it's all the same length. So you may have to grow it out some to be able to pull it apart a little, to pull smaller parts, smaller sections. The raking helps pull it uniformly over the whole head, so that new coat can be growing in, but then it also makes the layer that's longer sparser and sparser. So then it over time becomes easier and easier to pull that. Do note that every time you use the thinning shears to help make it look better, it looks better temporarily, but you're compounding the difficulty of hand stripping. But those are my general, that's my general feedback on how to approach it. If you give that a try and it's not working for you, or you would like some more clarification, then that's another great one to send me an email, and maybe we can get on a quick call so I can take a look at the situation you have and diagnose it a little bit more specifically and a little less generically.
Perfect. I love it. Regarding hard coat on legs for a show coat, is it the same for standards and minis?
No. And I think even in Europe, that's it's going to be true that, generally speaking, the mini Schnauzers carry a lot more hair on their legs than the standards and the giants. To be very transparent, I have the least experience with show minis in terms of grooming. I have a fair amount of experience pet grooming minis and even pet stripping minis, but I don't have very much firsthand experience with getting minis prepared for show. There are quite a few people in the Schnauzer Grooming Club who have a lot of experience with minis and have been very forthcoming with helping people in the group if they ask specific questions. So I'm going to suggest that if you have specific questions about show grooming minis, broach it in the Schnauzer Grooming Club group. And if the people who I know have some of that knowledge aren't seeing the post and you're not getting some responses, then I will tag some specific people to bring them in on your specific question to try to get you the information that you need, since it's a little bit outside the scope of my personal certainty. And my default is do no harm. So I don't want to give advice that might be the wrong advice, especially that might be the categorically wrong advice. So I'll help you connect with the people that you need to make sure that you get good and accurate information.
Wonderful. I think we found a limitation to Leslie's experience. For the first time in my experience with helping you, I found one of those. So the last one, what are chunking scissors for?
Chunking scissors. Okay. So we have, let me grab a couple of different scissors over here. Everybody's pretty familiar with straight shears. These are the ones with the straight edge. They cut in a straight line. I can kind of liken it to cutting, to drawing with ink. You know, you cut a straight line, it's there, for better or for worse. Then we have thinning shears, which has one straight blade and close together teeth. I kind of liken using thinning shears to using a pencil with an eraser, because you don't have to commit. I make some cuts with it. It leaves a little bit of a fuzzier edge, a little more natural edge. So if you're experimenting or you're trying to learn a new angle, or is this where I want to do the furnishings? Let me take a look. Or especially like around the face, and you're like, I don't know, is this where I want to make this cut? And if you do it with the straight scissors, you only get the one shot at it. And with the thinning shears, if you don't like where the line's going, you can stop and redirect. The chunkers are like the thinning shears, but the spaces are a lot bigger between. And so it takes a lot more hair at one time. I don't use these very much on schnauzers, although on a giant I will, because they tend to have a lot more volume of hair on their legs, and I might need to be shaping the furnishings. And if I'm trying to do that with the thinning shears, it might just take me bloody forever. So I might use chunkers in that case. They're basically just thinning shears that take more hair at a time. So definitely, I would say, especially if you're getting ready for show and you're trimming legs and you want to use the chunkers, try them out on the off show side first, on the handler side, not the judge's side, so that you can see the results that you get from using them. And you're not committing to something that you might or might not be able to fix if you don't like it. You're not committing to that on the show side. So you would use it pretty much anywhere you might want to use thinning shears, but I would say probably only on a giant. I can't really imagine using the chunkers on a mini, and mostly standards don't carry the profusion of coat that on the legs, the furnishings, that I would want to use chunkers for. So, and if you have any additional, looking for some additional information about that, either post it in the group or send me an email, and maybe it's something we get on a call about to help you explore.
Great. I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you very much for your expertise, Leslie, and for your time. And it's been wonderful listening to you explain all these things.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And I just want to thank everybody who came and everybody who's still here. I mean, part of why I have continued with the group and continued is because of the response, the positive response that I've gotten. The group is just now, I think April is its 1-year anniversary. So only a year ago, I started this group and I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know who would come. I didn't know who would be interested. And the group has over 7,000 people in it now, a year later. I really did not know to predict that or expect that. And so I appreciate everyone's patience with my learning curve on this as well. One of the things I love about the group being so large is it's a global group. So it means that there's a lot of different perspectives. There's a lot of different techniques. There's things that may be common knowledge in one part of the world that's not common knowledge about grooming in another part of the world, maybe because our coats are a little different in Europe versus the US, or North America versus the FCI countries. There's just a lot of differences. And so I really like the mixing of perspectives that we get in the group. I just love that about it. And I certainly didn't predict that when I started, but it's something that I love about our group. And I just really want to thank everybody for your interest and your feedback and your uh, constructive criticism. Not, it doesn't all have to be you're doing great. If you have constructive criticism, I'm open to it. Especially if any of you out there do have some experience in running a Facebook group. I did not expect that part of my learning curve for teaching was going to be learning how to run a Facebook group, but I've learned some things about that as well. So we do try to continue to improve everybody's experience in the group and in these learning environments like these webinars. So thank you again. And I really appreciate everybody. And just by being here, you're contributing to the spread of information, the spread of knowledge. And I think that's just super important with this breed. Such a special breed of dog. We love them. We all love them because they really are special and unique. And it's hard not to be passionate about them. But the hand stripping is an important part of maintaining the traditional working ability of the Schnauzer. And it's, like I said, it's a dying art. And I'd love to pass on more and more of what I've learned. And what I find the most helpful from the novices is I don't remember what it was like 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when I first stripped my first dog. I don't really remember all of my early challenges. So when you ask your questions, that helps refresh for me the things that I can look back on from my earlier days. What worked for me? Oh, right. And pass it on to you. So whether you're an expert or a novice, do please keep contributing, keep asking your questions, and let's all keep growing together. Thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, I appreciate your support and look forward to seeing you guys in the group and down the road. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.